Normally on this channel, I usually talk about horror-related media, but today I wanted to yap about something non-horror related so I can spare y'all some sweet dreams. Cuphead is a boss rush indie game that was released on September 27th, 2017 by Studio MDHR. This was one of those games where when it was first announced, you got very excited about it, but as time passed on and on, you barely heard anything about it, making you think it got the boot, but still had hope it was gonna release one day. And when it finally came out, it didn't turn out to be dog shit levels of garbage that most games turn out to be when they're in development hell. It was great! It was so good to where you think the game will change the gaming landscape forever and will continue to thrive on in popularity. I was first introduced to this game by legendary YouTuber CoreyX Kitchen, and when I saw some of the gameplay footage, as well as him raging, I couldn't help but fall in love with this game's charm. To its running gun platforming levels, to its creative yet challenging smorgasbord of bosses, to its old-timey 2D rubber hose animation style, this game just oozes with passion and makes you think the developers gave more than two shits. Now, at the time the game dropped, I owned an Xbox 360, well, you can get on an Xbox 360. It was also available on PS4 and PC, but I unfortunately didn't have those either. But then, on Christmas Day of 2021, I was super lucky enough to get a PS5. And then I remembered I could actually play the game for myself, so I did, and I loved it. And I'm gonna tell y'all why. But before I do that, I'm doing the annoying YouTube thing where I ask you that 8.8 out of 91.2% of you guys haven't subscribed yet. So if you haven't, please help a brother out by subscribing. It's free and it helps out the channel grow. Also hit the notification bell to never miss an upload. Anyways, let's move on. If you were to ask 10 people why Cuphead is such a unique game, 8 out of 10 people would say that it's the animation. Holy fucking moly, do these look smooth as hell. If you were to show this game to someone who grew up watching 2D hand-drawn animation, they'll be living back their childhood. I'm a sucker for 2D animation and would happily prefer it over the medium of 3D. I'm not saying 3D animation is bad, I just prefer the style of 2D more. Because it has a special charm to it in a way that can be only described as energetic zaniness. The animation in this game brings me back to the days of animated Disney movies before they would do live-action remakes a lot. It also reminds me of Warner Brothers' Looney Tunes shorts for its over-the-top wacky energy. And that's what I can perfectly describe Cuphead's animation in a nutshell. A game that looks like a hand-drawn Disney movie, but has the zany nature and violence of a Looney Tunes. And the fact that they're also doing other mediums of animation being used, that being stop motion, is also done very well and reminds me of Tim Burton's stop motion projects he made back then. More specifically, The Nightmare Before Christmas. Now, I could ramble on and on and on and on for hours about the animation, but I just think that there's more interesting stuff to talk about. Now, with the appetizer out of the way, I want to get into the main course of why this game is so special. Now, when it comes to this game being classified as a boss rush, I was just expecting it just to be fight a boss, congrats, now here's your reward, and continue the cycle. But I was wrong in the best possible way. Besides from fighting bosses, you can also do some other things that will help you progress through and make fighting the bosses a bit more easier, such as collecting gold coins in the running gun stages in the beautiful illustrated world of Inkwell Isle, or getting a super from a perfect balance of fun yet challenging Mausoleum minigames. There's also a King of the Hill-like minigame compilation in the DLC called The King's Court. We'll talk more about that when the time comes. But the main levels that everyone and their mama talks about in this game are the boss fights. They all range from the easiest thing you've played in your entire life to probably the most bullshit-ass boss to where you think if the playtesters of this game went through the 7 stages of grief like you are going through right now. There's also 2 types of bosses, land bosses and airplane bosses. Land bosses mostly consist of platforming, shooting, dodging, running away, parrying, and killing other enemies that will make it more difficult. For the plane bosses, it's just the same thing of rinse and repeat gameplay, but you're in a cute little plane, and it makes shooting the boss a bit more difficult. In my opinion, the most unique bosses in this game are King Dice for how balanced it is when it comes to boss fights and luck, the Angel and Devil secret boss in the DLC for how challenging yet creative its mechanics are, the Howling Aces for its last phase, and the Devil for its many unique moves and animation, as well as having a very terrifying 2nd and 4th phase, but saving someone very special later on. For the bosses I didn't mention, they're not bad at all. All the bosses in this game are really great, but the bosses I just listed were the standouts of the roster. I think the endings are pretty okay. There's 2 different endings in this game. The good ending, where you don't give the devil the soul contracts, fight him, and win, burning all the soul contracts you've collected through your journey, and live happily ever after. Then there's the bad ending, where you agree to give the devil the contracts and become henchmen of the devil, and getting evilized versions of Cuphead and Mugman, as well as Miss Chalice. Seriously, that image of them being very evil has been burned in my head since. And a little scary attention to detail is when you go back to the menu screen, the theme song is in reverse. Also, did I mention that this is entirely 2D? This would be average if it were a 3D game, but the fact that all the things I mentioned are in 2D, minus the stop motion, are absolutely insane. And I give mad kudos to Studio MDHR for it. If there's anything I remember from old school cartoons, it's that the background music sounds very jazzy, somewhat big band, and very energetic. And with the case of Cuphead, it captures that same lightning in the bottle amazingly well. The soundtrack has no right to go this hard than it already does. This shit slaps. And the fact that no computer work was done, it was actual drums, trumpets, xylophones, bass, and backup singers is just astonishing to me. It takes a lot of dedication and practice to nail it just right. And as composer Christopher Madigan ate and left no crumbs behind. This man needs a raise ASAP. And a little fun fact, I use some of the soundtrack in my videos, those being my first ever video on my channel, my Indigo Park video, and the video where I rank campy B horror movies.
Dearest Augustine, I do hope this latest death has not aggravated your great lung.
The second to last thing I'm covering about until we get to the DLC is the main game's story. It follows Cuphead and Mugman, brothers of their caretaker Elder Kettle. One day they end up in the wrong side of Inkwell Isle and end up in the Devil's Casino. Despite committing the greatest sin of gambling, they're doing pretty well to the point of being unstoppable, but that all changed when the devil showed up. He told them that he would give them all the money in his casino if they won one last roll. For purposes of plot, they lose and the devil wants their souls due to the bet they lost. Out of desperation, the brothers try to convince the devil that they'll do anything to make him change his mind. That being said, he makes the boys do his dirty work for him by collecting the soul contracts to his past debtors. While the story sounds like the life lesson of don't do gambling, it gets incredibly dark once you reach the final area of the main game, Inkwell Hell. Things get extremely intense from there on out and the stakes are much higher. That's why I'm such a huge fan of the endings. You can either A, accept who you are and become a servant to the bigger monster, the devil himself in this case, or stop doing orders from such a terrible person and stop being someone else's bitch and make the right choice to stand up to yourself and keep on living your simple, happy life. A simple yet effectively dark story for such a colorful and happy-go-lucky animated world.
Get the fuck out of my beaker!
Wrapping things up is that on June 30th, 2022, Cuphead made a massive return to the gaming community, well besides from the Netflix show, with its long-awaited DLC that was first revealed in 2018, cleverly titled The Delicious Last Course. When I first played through this DLC, I was fucking gobsmacked. The devs already took a timeless game and made an even more perfect DLC as if it were the cherry on top of a good sundae. As a matter of fact, I'd make the argument that the DLC is better than the entire base game of Cuphead. Better animation, more challenging boss fights, more mini-games and things to do if you're not fighting bosses, groovier soundtrack, practically better everything. The DLC blew the damn roof off, but there are two main standouts to why the Delicious Last Course is so peak. The first reason is the introduction of Miss Chalice. While she was in the base game, giving you, the player, the magical super arts, she's back and more unique than ever. What do I mean by unique? She has a completely new moveset. She has a parry dash, an invincible roll, and a double jump that comes in super clutch. To add the icing on the cake, her super arts are also different. She has a vertical beam, a shield that protects you from losing any of your lives, and she summons an army of spirits to wall up the bosses. Miss Chalice is like the DLC character of a fighting game, because she's better than both Cuphead and Mugman. They basically act the same, but who cares? And the last thing what makes the DLC great is Chef Saltbaker. In the beginning, he's the acclaimed best baker of all the lands, and seems like a very jolly fellow when you first meet him. But when you reach the end of the game, he turns out he's a bad guy, and he is also the biggest psychopath you'll see in your entire life. He says that the main ingredient in the Wonder Tart he plans to bring Miss Chalice into the real world requires a living soul of either Cuphead or Mugman. Jesus Christ. And when it comes to fighting him, he's such a pain in the ass to battle, but also a really well-constructed boss. He has some stellar animation smoother than my brain happening in the background, and a soundtrack that sounds like it came from a Christian-themed horror movie. Not to mention his other stages are terrifying yet so stress-inducing. The second phase is where you gotta get some pepper shakers to crack his Pinocchio-inspired face. Third phase is dodging and shooting his literal insides, and the final phase is doing some platforming while shooting and parrying his heart. This is probably the most challenging boss fight I've ever played in a video game in my entire life. The DLC was without a doubt my favorite piece of Cuphead media ever. It makes me wish we'll get to see more from this charming work of art. And that's pretty much about it. After you watch this video and have the time, I highly recommend you go download Cuphead and play it for yourself. It's such a unique boss rush that I feel like should get more appreciation. It won't cost you a few dollars in a lot of your mentality, but take my word for it, it's 100% worth it. Like I said before, I really wish we get to see Cuphead return somewhere in the near future, but considering that it is called the Delicious Last Course, we'll probably never get to see this goofy little guy ever again. But until we meet again, this is that one Gorehound signing off, and remember to have a bloody good day or night. Bye bye.
We have